Welcome back to 5 Academy. Today we're going to be going over general tips and tricks for the math section of the ACT. The first rule is to not overthink this section. If you get stuck on a problem and don't know how to do the algebra, move on. Keep going to the next one. Each question is a new try because it doesn't depend on information given in a passage. The second rule is to approach each problem the same way. Read the problem, see what they're given, and solve for an answer. There are 4 ways that I like to do this: back solving, picking a number, traditional math, and strategically guessing. For back solving, pick an answer choice and plug it in. One of those choices is going to be correct. For the next one, pick a number. If there's a variable, pick a regular number within range and solve. For traditional math, if you know the concept and how to do it, go on and work it out how you would in a math class. And then for strategically solving, pick a letter that day, rule out answer choices that just physically could not be a thing. And our third rule is about knowing triangle identities and being able to identify them. Things such as the 45-45-90 triangle, where your hypotenuse is a square root of 2 and both legs are 1. Or the 30-60-90 triangle, where the hypotenuse is 2 and then a leg is square root of 3 and another leg is 1. Knowing these can help save tons of time and also help you apply concepts. Also, the Pythagorean triplets. Those are great ways to be able to identify when you need to use the Pythagorean theorem and find values outside of a triangle. Our fourth general rule is to keep track of your negative signs. So on the ACT, they like to give you answers like -101 and +101. So whatever you're doing algebra, make sure you're keeping up with where your negatives are. If you move something over, change the sign, things like that. Our fifth rule is about time management. So as this section goes on, the questions get harder. So around 40 to 60, those are harder concepts. But the first 1 through 40 are easier concepts. So there's 2 approaches to this. If you struggle with the hard questions, spend a lot of time on the beginning, just because those are questions that you're more than likely going to be able to answer and get correct without just guessing. But also don't forget to save time for the end questions. Or if you know that you understand harder concepts, but it might just take you longer to do the math or figure out, then make sure you answer the first 1 through 40 quick and precisely, being careful not to make any careless errors with negatives or addition, multiplication, anything like that, and then move on to the end. Our sixth rule is about understanding concepts. So for the math section of the ACT, all of the questions that they ask and all of the algebra they're asking you to test, you've been taught in a classroom setting. So when you take a practice test, see what you're weaker and stronger at. Concepts that you're not so familiar with or it's been a long time since you learned, test up on those, study up on those before your next ACT. The seventh rule is to know your formulas, and this can be difficult because there's so many and you have to be able to apply all of them. But if you start studying enough in advance, you can have time, make flashcards, go through your formulas and practice problems. Practice using the formulas and applying them.
Your formulas are with average, adding all the values, then dividing by the number of terms. Probability, target outcomes over total outcomes. Quadratic formula, x equals -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Distance formula, d equals the square root of x2 minus x1 squared plus y1 minus y2 squared. Slope formula, y2 minus y1 equal over x squared minus x1. Slope-intercept form, y equals mx plus b. The midpoint formula, with x1 plus x2 over 2 being the point for x, y1 plus y2 over 2 being the point for y. Basically, that one is the average of x and the average of y, and those are both of their values. Area of a triangle, area of a rectangle, a parallelogram, an area of a square, or a circle even. Those are all values that you need to know. Circumference of a circle, 2 pi r. How to find diameter, things like that. SOHCAHTOA as well. Sine equals opposite over hypotenuse, cosine adjacent over hypotenuse, tangent opposite over adjacent. All of these are important formulas that you should be familiar with for your next ACT.
The next rule is to not get lost in the fluff of a word problem. So ACT word problems are usually abnormally long for no reason. You might need 1 or 2 bits of information from it. Look for your numbers, look for your variables, and look for what they're asking you to find, and then solve. I like to underline these or box them in just so I can look back at the problem quickly and know what I need.
So now we're going to go through some practice problems. So we see that this rectangle has an area of 48 feet squared and a perimeter of 32 feet. We know the formula for area of a rectangle being length times width. And then the perimeter would be found by adding both the long sides together and the short sides together, which is represented by 2x plus 2y. It gives us the value for each of those, so I set them equal to 48 and 32. Then you have to set one of them equal and find a variable. So I did 32 minus 2x equals 2y, and then divided that by 2 to single out y alone so that you can plug in y to your area formula. Whenever you simplify, you get 16 minus x equals y. So we plug in 48 equals x times 16 minus x, and then distribute that out, getting 16x minus x squared, and then I went on and moved my 48 over. So then from there, if you rewrite it, that's a perfect equation to be able to factor. So whenever I factored, you can do this however you want. I did x plus 12 multiplied by x minus 4. So we know that the length can't be negative, so I omitted that sign just because the length of the rectangle would have been 12, and it's also 4. And then the answer for the long side of this is D, which is 12. This is a practice problem where the word problem is unnecessarily wordy, but all you need out of it is 15 per day, 5 per person, and then what it wants, which is usually the last sentence of every question. So I highlighted the whole thing just to be able to look at it. But it also gave you the variable in between. So using that, I did 15 per day and then 5 per person. And that answers B. The next problem is basically just a plug-in problem. Simple math, but also this would be a great problem if you didn't know how to do it, to use the answers and plug them in for C, because no matter what, they're going to equal A, which is 250. But here we got C by itself and then took a square root, and the answer would be 5. The next one is noticing patterns within a problem. So here we notice that 3 multiplied by negative 2 will give you negative 6. Negative 6 multiplied by 12 will give you, negative 6 multiplied by negative 2 will give you positive 12, and so on and so forth. So I drew out this pattern here, and I like to draw the little lines signifying what's happening in between those numbers. So from then, I drew a little chart just to organize my numbers, and I wrote them all out. I just multiplied, plugged it in your calculator, and you're good to go. And so we see 48, negative 96. 192 and negative 384. This is also another part of the thing where you have to be very careful with your negative signs. Number 9 is about an isosceles triangle. An isosceles triangle has 2 legs that are the same length and then one leg that's not. So this would be a prime example of a 45, 45, 90 triangle. With 45, 45, 90 triangles, if you remember, the hypotenuse is the square root of 2, and then both legs are 1. So it gives us the actual length of the hypotenuse, and so we set it equal to whatever the equation is, and we write x as both of them. So we know we need to solve for x. When solving for x, you do 6 divided by the square root of 2. Once you do that, you have to multiply by the square root of 2 again, because you can't have a square root in the denominator like that. Whenever you do that, you get 6 over the multiplied by square root of 2 over 2. And then simplifying that will give you 3 over square root of 2, which is the answer B. For this is a prime example of having to apply formulas with slope form, like y equals mx plus b. So you know that y is supposed to be on the other side and x is supposed to be on the other side. So we moved both of those around, keeping in mind of our negative symbols. Then we divided by negative 5 to get it alone. So dividing by negative 5 would have given us y equals negative 3x over negative 5 minus 2 over 5. And of course, being 2 negatives on top of each other, those signs canceled out. But we see in the formula how y equals m. M represents slope, and in this, 3 over 5 is m. Therefore, 3 over 5 is our slope. For this is another thing with SOHCAHTOA, which are trig values. And so is sine equals opposite over hypotenuse. Ka is cosine equals adjacent over hypotenuse. And TOA is tangent equals opposite over hypotenuse. So for this problem, it wants the tangent. So you look at where the theta value is, and you see that the opposite of that is b. Well, whenever you're picking adjacent, you know that the longer side that's diagonal is the hypotenuse. So A would be its adjacent. So the answer is B over A. For this one, this is just adding, but the way that they worded it can make you question the way to solve it. So you see that A and B equal 53. But you know that the area of a triangle the angles of a triangle have to equal up to 180. So knowing that, you can say 53 plus C will give you 180 degrees. And since it wants the angle of C, that's what that little half triangle denotes, you just subtract 53 from 180 and you see that C is 127. For this one, I included this because it's an easy way to lose negative signs with how it's written, because the negative is in front of the whole parentheses, meaning it changes the sign of everything inside of it. So I separated out the variables that were alike to keep straight my addition and subtraction, and also keep straight the negative signs. So then after that, I just looked through the problem, the answer choices, and saw which one aligned with my answers.
Thank you for watching our video. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and check out our website linked down below.